and extend Article 50 to enable the people finally to vote on what is the sole justification that she sees for backing Brexit, and that is the will of the people.
Can I say to the
Prime Minister,
if he is so concerned about ensuring that we don't leave the European Union without a deal, then he has a simple route through it, and that is to back the deal that the government brings back from the European Union.
Sir Oliver Heald.
Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to my old friend Steve Diamond, a haemophiliac sufferer who was infected with blood which was contaminated. He fought bravely for many years, over 20 years, showing great bravery and also resilience, and was supported throughout by his wife Sue. He was very grateful when the inquiry was set up, the Langstaff inquiry. And does she agree with me that it is vital that all the necessary NHS documents and all the medical notes which may be needed by that inquiry are available to it so it can be fully comprehensive?
Well, first
Minister.
of all, join my right honourable friend in paying tribute to Steve Diamond. The contaminated blood scandal was an appalling tragedy. It should never have happened, and it's vital that victims and their families who've suffered so much get the answers and justice they deserve. And they've waited, as we all know, they've waited decades for this. I'm assured by the Department for Health and Social Care that they have sent thousands of documents to the inquiry already and will send more when necessary. But we are committed to being open and transparent with the inquiry, and we have waived the usual legal privileges to assist the process. It's important that this inquiry is able to get to the truth.
Phil Wilson.
Prime Minister, since 2010, Conservative governments have taken £6 billion out of the North East. Can we have it back, please?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, this is a government. This is a government that is ensuring that we're working across the whole country, that we're delivering an economy for everyone across the whole country. And he talks about billions of pounds in relation to the North. He might just want to reflect on the £13 billion being put into transport in the north of this country.
Ricklefield.
Prime Minister, join me in welcoming Councillor Anne Meadows, who today left the Labour Party in neighbouring Brighton Hove, has crossed the floor, joined the Conservatives, who are now the largest group on Brighton Hove Council. And the reason Councillor Meadows has left the Labour Party is because of the rise of anti-Semitism and bullying that she and her colleagues have experienced under Momentum activists. So much so that only 7 of the 23 councillors there will be restanding in May. Does the Prime Minister agree that now anti-Semitism is rife throughout the whole of the Labour Party?
Minister.
Can I first of all agree with my honourable friend? As she says, a long-serving Labour councillor, Anne Meadows, in Brighton and Hove, has today chosen to leave Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party and join the Conservatives. And that's due to the bullying and anti-Semitism she has received from Momentum and the hard left. And that's the harsh reality that decent, moderate Labour councillors are having to face every day due to Jeremy Corbyn's failure to stand up to bullying and racism in his party. And we welcome her with open arms into the Conservative Party. I'm sure she will be an excellent Conservative councillor.
Rosie Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a constituent who is left doubly incontinent following a serious and very violent sexual assault. She previously had a lifetime award of disability living allowance. However, recent PIP assessments have concluded that she is not entitled to DLA or the mobility components of PIP, despite this extremely difficult condition dominating every aspect of her daily life. Will the Prime Minister please ask the Secretary of State to look urgently at the DWP's failure to recognise the impact of this very serious condition?
Prime Minister.
Recognise that I'm not able to respond to the individual details of the case at the dispatch box, but I will ensure that the Department for Work and Pensions and the relevant minister looks at that case and responds to the honourable lady.
David Tredynick.
Improving mental health care has rightly become a priority for the government. But can my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, tell us, is the government doing anything to improve the situation concerning mental health for NHS staff who are hard-pressed and deserve support?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend raises an important point, because obviously our dedicated NHS staff day in and day out are delivering unwavering commitment and caring for us all. And obviously it is necessary that we ensure that their mental health is looked after. We're setting up a dedicated mental health support service which will offer NHS staff confidential advice and support 24 hours a day. It'll be staffed by qualified professionals who have had training in situations that are unique to the National Health Service, and will ensure that mental health referrals from either a GP or an occupational health clinician for NHS employees are fast-tracked. It's right that the mental and physical well-being is at forefront of our health service. It's right that we are taking this action to support our dedicated NHS staff.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Local Government Association has identified a potential £1.6 billion deficit for special needs education, but the government's responded with a paltry £350 million. So as a result, head teachers in my Brighton constituency are literally having sleepless nights. Vital reading programmes for children with SEN are being cut, crucial support staff are being lost. So instead of repeating her usual line on schools funding, will she agree to meet a delegation of head teachers from Brighton so she can hear direct from them about the real pain that's being caused?
Can I say to
Minister.
the Honourable Lady, first of all, I'm sure the Honourable Lady will look forward to working well with the largest group on Brighton and Hove Council now, the Conservative group on Brighton and Hove Council. She raises this issue about education funding. She refers to answers I've given in the past, because we have been putting more funding into education. We have been doing that in a number of ways. We have announced extra support, as she said, for children with complex special educational needs, and that's building on the £6 billion which is in place for that this year, the highest level on record. The Honourable Lady says it's not enough, but it is the highest level on record, and we are also putting money into new school places and better facilities for children with special educational needs.
Robert Goodwill.
Thank you. Communities up and down the country are installing defibrillators. The village of Brompton in my constituency has one in a former telephone box, a stone's throw away from the main road, but not directly visible from it. Does the Prime Minister think it would be a good idea if we had a nationally approved defibrillator road sign so that these life-saving devices could be quickly accessed in the event of an emergency?
Prime Minister.
Can I commend the action being taken in my right honourable friend's constituency? I see the same action being taken in my constituency of people ensuring that defibrillators are available. He's raised a very interesting point, and I'll ask the Department of Transport to look at it seriously.
Lyndon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Recent research from the charity Bliss shows that 2/3 of dads have to return to work whilst their premature or sick babies are still in the neonatal intensive care unit. So if the Prime Minister thinks this is unjust, will she work with me to ensure that we change employment law and make sure that the dads and parents of premature babies like myself get the support they need to support their families?
Minister.
Can I say to the Honourable Gentleman, obviously I know this is an issue that's close to the heart of many members, but particularly close to the heart of the Honourable Gentleman. And I know that he has met with ministers to discuss this issue last year. Officials in BEIS are undertaking what is a short, focused internal review of provisions for parents of premature, sick and multiple babies to obtain an understanding of the barriers to participating in the labour market. They're working with organisations such as Bliss, The Smallest Things and TAMBA to better understand these issues, and they've held focus group with a number of parents, and they've offered to discuss the conclusions that are reached with those interested parties in due course, and I'm sure we'll be happy to meet with the Honourable Gentleman to discuss this and taking this forward.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware that the British Army has engaged in a recruitment campaign in Commonwealth countries. However, it is the case that only after soldiers have signed up for minimum 4-year contracts do they find out that they're not allowed to bring their children to this country. Given that these are brave women and men who are prepared to put their lives on the line for us and our country, I hope the Prime Minister will agree with me that this is something that needs to be looked into urgently. Will she therefore kindly agree to meet with me and others concerned to see how this matter can be progressed?
Minister.
my right honourable friend that the issue, I'm aware of the issue that he has raised. I'm told by the Ministry of Defence that they do make sure that information is available to individuals about what their situation will be. But I know that this is a matter that obviously crosses, it's not just of concern to the Ministry of Defence. Obviously, the issue of the immigration rules rests with the Home Office as well. And and I will certainly meet with my right honourable friend and discuss this issue.
Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 70% of flights are taken by 15% of the population, yet the Tees-Mayor has just spent up to £90 million of taxpayers' money buying an airport when most people across the area can't get a bus home after 6:30 at night. Could you help them out?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the honourable gentleman, I mean, I recognise the importance of buses to our communities. We've been spending £250 million every year to keep fares down and maintain an extensive network. And the honourable gentleman might like to know that actually since 2010, we've seen 10,000 new routes across the North and the Midlands, and live local bus services registered have increased 15% in just the last 2 years.
Roger Gale.
Speaker Paul Flynn was in his time a valued member of the United Kingdom delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And I know that colleagues on both sides of the House who serve on that body would like to join others in expressing our condolences to his family. Mr. Speaker, my armed forces constituents will be pleased to know that with effect from the start of this year, ex-service men and women will receive ID cards. Will my right honourable friend join me in expressing the hope that in time that card will become a passport to public recognition of some of the bravest and finest in our country?
Prime Minister.
To my honourable friend, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to the ex-forces community, and we are working hard, as he's indicated, to ensure that they receive the support that they deserve. As he says, any personnel who left the military since December 2018 will automatically be given one of these new ID cards, which will allow them to maintain a tangible link to their career and in the forces. But as my right honourable friend, the Minister for Defence People and Veterans, said, these new cards celebrate the great commitment and dedication of those who have served this country. And I hope they can provide a further link to ex-personnel and the incredible community around them. And I hope they will, as my honourable friend says, be a sign of the incredible valour that those ex-servicemen and women have shown.
Angela Eagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2017, during the election, we learned what the Prime Minister's definition of strong and stable was. As our automotive industry disintegrates before our eyes, as investment is put on hold, as growth slows, are we now learning what the Prime Minister's definition of smooth and orderly Brexit is?
Prime Minister.
To the honourable lady, as I say to every member of this House, there will come a further point in this chamber when every member will have a decision to take as to whether we want to ensure that we deliver on the vote of the referendum, on which most members of this House stood on a manifesto to do that, and to do that by leaving the EU with a deal. That will be a decision for all members of this House. I know where I stand. I believe we should be leaving with a deal. I hope the honourable lady agrees.
Thank you. Order. No, points of order will come after the urgent questions. We have urgent questions and then there will be an opportunity for points of order if people wish to raise them. Order. Urgent question. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Prime Minister to make a statement on the economic impact of her government's proposed deal for the UK exiting the EU?
Secretary to Treasury and Paymaster General, Minister Mel Stride.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. At the end of November, the Government published our analysis assessing the economic impact of leaving the European Union. It not only included an analysis of the Government's negotiating position as set out in the July 2018 White Paper, but it went further still and considered 3 other scenarios: a free trade agreement, an EEA-type relationship and a no-deal scenario. Specifically, the analysis showed that the outcomes for the proposed future UK-EU relationship would deliver significantly higher economic output, about 7 percentage points higher than the no-deal scenario. A no-deal scenario which would result in lower economic activity in all sector groups of the economy compared to the White Paper scenario. Mr. Speaker, that is why we should pass this deal to avoid no deal and support jobs and the UK economy. In publishing this work, the Government delivered on its commitment to provide an appropriate level of analysis to Parliament. In addition, this House has had plenty of opportunity to debate both the analysis and the deal that is on the table. As the Prime Minister has said, we will bring a revised deal back to this House for a second meaningful vote as soon as we possibly can. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, it is right that the Government is afforded the flexibility and space to continue our negotiations. This is because the agreement of the political declaration will be followed by negotiations on the legal text. The UK and the EU recognise that this means there could be a spectrum of different outcomes. Mr. Speaker, we need to approach these negotiations with as much strength as possible. The focus must now be on the future, planning and prioritising that which matters. Mr. Speaker, let me remind the House we will have an implementation period, a new close relationship with the EU, and crucially the ability to strike trade deals around the world, bringing back control over our money, borders and laws to mould a prosperous and ambitious new path for our country and on our terms. No matter what approach we take, the UK economy will continue to be strong and grow into the future.
Ian Blackford.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to say, with respect to the Minister, and of course this was a question to the Prime Minister, and it's the Prime Minister that should be answering. This is a matter of the utmost importance, because this House is going to be asked to vote on the Prime Minister's deal. And the specific question that was asked is the economic analysis that this government has done on its deal. And it's quite clear from the answer that the Minister has just given that the government has done no analysis on this deal. And the most important matter that arguably that this House has voted on since the Second World War, we don't have an economic impact statement from this government. Mr. Speaker, that is once again this Conservative government treating this House, treating the United Kingdom with contempt. And it's a disgrace that the government has continued to duck and dive its responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, economists are clear. The PM's deal is set to hit GDP, the public finances and living standards. Analysis published by the LSE estimates the Brexit deal could reduce UK GDP per capita by between 1.9 and 5.5% over 10 years, compared to remaining in the EU. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research have warned that if the government's proposed Brexit deal is implemented, then GDP in the longer term will be around 4% lower than it would have been if we stayed in the EU. The Bank of England analysis states that the government's deal will raise unemployment by 4% and inflation by 2%. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is running feart of the truth, with her government refusing to admit the damage that her deal will do. The government cannot claim that its November document covers its deal. Let's look at the facts. Page 17 of the Treasury analysis looked at the modelled average free trade agreement, and it states, as such, it does not seek to define or model a bespoke agreement. But, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister tells us she has a bespoke deal. The Treasury analysis continues. This scenario is not indicative of government policy, as it would not meet UK objectives, including avoiding a hard border in Northern Ireland. There we have it, in black and white. The Treasury analysis conducted last year does not account for the Prime Minister's deal. So I say to the Government, where is the analysis? MPs continue to be expected to vote on the proposed deal without the Government explaining the economic consequences, the height of their responsibility. Mr Speaker, this deal would be a disaster for Scotland, taking us out of the EU single market and customs union. We know that up to 100,000 jobs in Scotland are under threat. This Government is sticking its head in the sand. Everyone knows that this Government is bringing our economy to its knees. We cannot allow the Tories to drive us off the cliff edge. No government can be allowed to bring forward a vote on such a significant matter without an economic assessment. It must be published. Shame on the Prime Minister if she fails to protect our economy. Shame on those on the government benches if they allow businesses to collapse and jobs to be lost. And shame on any MP, including the Leader of the Opposition, if they march through the lobbies to deliver a deal that secures economic catastrophe. Mr Speaker, no member should believe this is a binary choice. It is not. There is not a choice. It is not a choice of no deal or this deal. Both are bad. Both will plunge our economy into a mitigated disaster.
Order. Just before I ask the Minister to reply, I very generously did not interrupt the flow of the Right Honourable Gentleman's eloquence, or indeed, for that matter, the eloquence of his flow. However, by way of a public information notice, can I say to the House, and it is not directed particularly at the Right Honourable Gentleman, because I have seen this burgeoning phenomenon in recent times, that an urgent question is supposed to be that, not an urgent oration with whatever rhetorical force and insistence it is delivered. It is supposed to be a question. And I have noticed over recent times an increasing tendency on the part of members who have secured such, courtesy of the Chair, to launch into a lengthy preamble, sometimes constituting the entirety of their remarks. So for future reference, because in future I will have to cut people off if they abuse, however inadvertently, the parameters, it is supposed to be a question. A sentence of preamble is one thing, but thereafter a member should put a series of inquiries to the Minister on the Treasury bench. But we'll leave it there for now. The Right Honourable Gentleman's made his point, but I know that he won't misbehave again. Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his vociferous oration. But vociferous orations do not serve as any substitute, Mr Speaker, I'm afraid, for the facts. And I need to remind the Right Honourable Gentleman of some of the facts in respect of the points that he made. He says, Mr Speaker, that we have made no analysis of the impact of these arrangements on the United Kingdom economy, and that is simply not the case. The information that we have come forward with is a very robust analysis of the future outcomes of the 4 different scenarios which we consider in that analysis. He levels the charge, Mr Speaker, that we are treating the United Kingdom in some way with contempt. That is certainly not the case. This House has been very deeply preoccupied with the matters of Brexit and the nature of the way in which we may exit the European Union, and indeed the Prime Minister has set out that there will be further debate this time next week, to be followed in the event that we haven't passed a meaningful vote with another amendable motion before this House. The Right Honourable Gentleman also says that the deal, as he terms it, would have a negative impact on the UK economy. Well, what the analysis clearly shows is that under every single scenario that it analyses, it is better to have this deal than no deal or any of the alternatives. And finally, Mr Speaker, he made the observation that, or decried the fact that we had not put forward a bespoke deal for analysis within our analysis, and that really, Mr Speaker, is to illustrate the lack of understanding that the Right Honourable Gentleman has as to what the future political declaration is all about, which is a range of possible outcomes, and that is entirely what this analysis models.
Mr Kenneth Clarke.